Hello, everyone. Welcome. Let's see, we got Jeff, Pink Cupcakes, Lobsel, Daniel, Dark Spark, Phil. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Halloween all month long. This is the only non-Halloween event, and it just so happens to be the first one of the month, which is hilarious. Because the TV show that this book inspired, that is based on this book, is still airing every Wednesday, and I'd like to continue to watch it live with folks. So we're going to keep reading this every Thursday. Hello, Bob. We'll keep reading this every Thursday, a couple chapters, and then we'll watch the episodes of the show. I think we have 2 to watch this week because we missed last week, so that'll be fun. I think there's only like 10 episodes, so we should finish it by the end of the month. The other book we've been reading, Heaven Official's Blessing, will be on pause. We'll wait until next month, which, conveniently, is when the Heaven Official's Blessing anime comes out. So that'll be really neat. We'll be able to time those 2 up together. That'll be fun. The camera's very close. That's probably because of my new TV setup. Let's see if I can see. Oops. There goes my book. Let's see there. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I've been, editing things a little bit and trying to make them spoopy. Oh, Bob wants out. I'm gonna go let Bob out. Alright, Bob. Be free. And then in just a few minutes, we're going to hear the creepy scratching noises that mean Bob wants back in the room now. Okay, so Scum Villain. Scum Villain's Self-Saving System is the full title. We just say Scum Villain. That is a book, a web novel, a Chinese web novel, by Mojang Tongju. I am probably saying that wrong, but it's really fun. It's a really great story of a guy that dies and gets transmigrated into a novel that he hates as the bad guy. And he has to try and make it so that he does not die, and takes care of the hero and try and befriend him. Well, lo and behold, he accidentally makes the hero fall in love with him eventually. We're still in the sort of the establishing portion of the story. Chapter 4. Secretly assisting the male lead. To Shen Qingchu, it wasn't clear what he was thinking, but he must have heard the affectionate way Ning Yingying addressed Luo Binghe, and felt that this annoying Shidi had become even more irritating. I should step back and remind y'all, last time, our hero, Shen Qingchu, had wandered off into the woods and stumbled upon his students. Ning Yingying is the young woman, the female student called Shimei, like little sister. She's hanging out with the Luo Binghe, who is the fictional book in universe the protagonist, the guy that we're trying to befriend. And then a bunch of bullies come up and they're going to start bullying Luo Binghe. So he's watching this about to happen. In the end, Ning Yingying had a young girl's disposition, completely unable to take the hint or read the atmosphere, and asked, head tilted, "What fun thing does Shishong have? Hurry up and show it to me." Ming Fan became all smiles, unfastened a deep green jade accessory from his waist, and held it in front of her. "Shimei, when my family came to visit this time, they brought me lots of high quality and interesting little things. I saw this one was particularly pretty. I'll give it to you." Ning Yingying took it from him and looked at it closely in the sunlight shining through the leaves. Ming Fan warmly asked, "Well, do you like it?" Peeping from his place, Shen Qingchu finally remembered. This scene. Not good. He shouldn't have come. Danger. But he couldn't be blamed for not remembering clearly. How could someone who'd cursed dumbfuck author, dumbfuck novel, remember ancient content from the beginning of a novel that had serialized for 4 years and covered a span of 200 years? He'd spent 20 days reading the novel before finishing, so had long clean forgotten that wump plot filled with pointless abuse from Luo Binghe's beginnings at the sect, okay? Nin Yingying had absolutely no idea what was high quality or not. After looking haphazardly at it for a while, she tossed the jade accessory back. Ming Fan's smile froze. Ning Ying Ying wrinkled her nose and said carelessly, "What? This color's so ugly. The one Ah Luo has is prettier." Now, not only did Ming Fan look unhappy, even Luo Binghe, who'd been wisely pretending not to exist, tremored lightly and quickly opened his eyes. Ming Fan spat a couple of words through gritted teeth. "Does Shidi also wear this kind of thing?" Luo Binghe hesitated slightly and hadn't managed to answer when Ning Ying Ying budged in first and said, "Of course he does. All day long he lovingly wears it around his neck. It's his treasure. He refuses to even let me see it." No matter how composed Luo Binghe was, at this point his expression changed, and he unconsciously clutched at the guanin pendant around his neck, hidden beneath his clothes. We'll have to take a moment. I'm probably saying the word wrong, but Guanyin is the name of one of the goddesses, the goddess of mercy. She features a lot in these stories. I believe she's originally borrowed from India and Hindu traditions, but she features a lot in these stories as kind of a symbol. It's a little hard to explain, but like the very last confrontation in another book by this woman, the Untamed Modao Zushi, is in a temple to Guanyin, the goddess of mercy. So that's a famous figure you're going to hear a lot of in these kind of stories. "Your IQ and EQ, young lady. The male lead is truly collateral damage." When she'd said these words, Ning Ying Ying completely hadn't considered the consequences, only that she always saw Luo Binghe glued to and wearing a jade guanin, never parting with it. Girls especially invariably wanted to get their hands on things their crushes treasured, which would give them the satisfaction of being in a special position. Yet Luo Binghe simply refused to give. Displeased, she'd brought it up in this half-sweet, half-brazen manner. Of course he refused, okay? Luo Binghe's washerwoman mother spent the majority of her life's earnings to finally, with great difficulty, give her son the protective charm she wanted for him. In Luo Binghe's dark world, it was the only bit of warmth in his life by his side. Even at his blackest later, it could bring back his last dregs of humanity. How could he randomly hand it to others? Ming Fan was both angry and jealous, advancing forward a few steps, and harshly said, "Luo Shidi, you sure are stuck up, refusing to show Ning Ying Ying Shime your accessory. If this keeps on in the future when we face strong enemies, will you even refuse to lend a hand?" Young man, there is definitely a logic gap between your first and second lines. Ning Ying Ying hadn't thought things would turn out like this, and anxiously stamped her feet. "It's fine if he's not willing. Shishong, don't bully him." How could Luo Binghe outfight Ming Fan at this point? Plus, there was a group of disciples, being Ming Fan's lackeys, and ganging up on him. In a moment, the jade guanyin fell from his neck into Ming Fan's hands. He raised it for a look, then suddenly laughed out loud. Confused, Ning Ying Ying said, "Why are you laughing?" Ming Fan tossed the jade accessory into Ning Ying Ying's hands and said gleefully, "I thought it to be some rare treasure for him to protect it so fiercely. Shime, guess how it is? It's Jibei goods." That means fake. Ning Ying Ying said confused, "Shibei goods? What's that?" Luo Binghe's fist slowly clenched, an undercurrent surging in the depths of his eyes, and said word by word, "Give it back!" Shen Qingchu's fingers also involuntarily twitched several times. Naturally, he knew that Jade Guanyin was a fake, and it was Luo Binghe's largest berserk button. That year, the washerwoman had skimped and saved on food and utilities, but because she lacked experience, a con man tricked her into paying a high price for a fake. Heartbroken, her body steadily deteriorated afterwards. It was undoubtedly a pain Luo Binghe couldn't remove his entire life. This was the one thing Luo Binghe could never tolerate. As a bystander, Shen Qingchu really wanted to reach out, beat Ming Fan up, snatch the jade accessory back, and toss it to Luo Binghe. Also, like this, maybe Ming Fan wouldn't thoroughly offend Luo Binghe and keep his paltry life after. The system. OOC! Shen Qingchu. Thank you, shut up. Ming Fan plucked the accessory from Ning Ying Ying's hands and said in a disgusted manner, "You want it back? I'll give it back. Who knows which street stall this cheap good was purchased from? I'm afraid giving it to Shime would dirty her hands." So he said, but without the slightest intention of returning it. Luo Binghe's face was tight. He suddenly struck out with both fists, hitting the couple of low-ranked disciples restraining him. When enraged, one's blows have no technique, only random strikes fueled by the anger within. At first, he managed to cow that couple of low-ranked disciples, but they quickly figured out that this guy was incredibly weak, that only his manner was impressive. Plus, Mingfan was calling from above, "What are you frozen for? He dared attack his Shishongs. Teach him what it means to respect seniority." They all regained their courage at once and surrounded Luo Binghe, clobbering him. Ning Yingying was scared stiff, her pitiful brain capacity still not understanding why things had progressed to this situation, and she yelled, "Shishong, how could you do this? Hurry up and tell them to stop, or I'll never talk to you ever again." Mingfan panicked. "Shimei, don't be angry. I'll tell them to stop hitting this guy, okay?" Before he finished speaking, as soon as he was distracted, Luo Binghe broke free from the many hands and legs that tackled him, sending a fist into Mingfan's nose. A yell of "Ayah!" and Mingfan's nostrils immediately flowed 2 streams of fresh blood. Ning Yingying was initially about to burst into tears. When she saw this, she couldn't help let out a laugh. Shen Qingchu, "Sister, really, do you like Luo Binghe, or do you want to hurt him?" Originally, Mingfan could have let Luo Binghe go, but now that he'd been humiliated before his crush, he couldn't let it go, no matter what. The two of them twisted into a heap, fighting, but no matter how awesome Luo Binghe's talent, he was still young and hadn't cultivated using the proper manuals. For the most part, he was one-sidedly beaten, yet remained silent through clenched teeth. Shen Qingchu subconsciously wanted to take action, but the system exploded with a terrifying alarm. "Severe OOC! Severe OOC! Important things... Severe OOC! Important things must be said 3 times. In this situation, Shen Qingchu would choose to smile, watching from the sidelines, hands in his sleeves, or personally beat him himself." What a pleasant man. Honestly, you learn more about the guy later that kind of makes me feel bad for him, but, he's questionable. To make him look on when a child was being abused was really too inhuman. Shen Qingchu couldn't rashly take risks. In the middle of being anxious, he suddenly thought of a method of compromise. Kangchong Mountain Sec had a little technique, plucking leaves, flying flowers. At a glance, it wasn't very useful, just aesthetic and interesting. The original described how Luo Binghe used it to easily win woman number N's affections. These days, Shen Qingchu had been furiously reviewing various manuals and had seen the record for this little technique. He plucked a nearby leaf and channeled a little spiritual power into it. The first time he channeled too much. The leaf couldn't withstand it and immediately split into several pieces. He only succeeded the second time, held it between his fingertips and gently blew, letting go. The leaf immediately shot towards Mingfan like an airborne knife. Hearing Mingfan's long, horrible scream, Shen Qingchu flapped his hand, then wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. No wonder it was said, if an expert, even a flower or tree could be used to hurt people. He shouldn't have killed Mingfan just now, right? Luo Binghe had suffered quite a few punches and kicks, yet suddenly felt Mingfan stagger backwards. He looked up. Fresh blood dripped from his forehead past his eyes, but he didn't expect that when Mingfan stretched out his hand, his palm was also covered in blood. Mingfan was in disbelief. "You dare use a knife?" Just before, seeing how furious their fight was, Ning Yingying hadn't dared come close, but now she hurried to place herself between the two. No, Aluo didn't use a knife. It wasn't him." Luo Binghe also didn't know what had happened. He closed his mouth tightly and tried to clean the blood from his face. Blood was seeping out on Mingfan's back, like he'd cut with the edge of a sword. He interrogated the other disciples. "Did you see clearly? Was he holding a knife?" The disciples looked around at each other, shaking their heads, some nodding, completely disordered. Mingfan was a spoiled and pampered young master, and had never suffered this level of physical pain. Seeing his own hand covered with blood, a surge of panic went through his heart. But the puzzling thing was, he saw no weapon on either the ground or Luo Binghe's person. It couldn't have vanished into thin air, right? Shen Qingchu held his breath. His vision suddenly flashed red, and a line of huge floating text popped up before him, in an eye-catching and frightening blood red. "Violation! OOC. B points -10. Current B points, 90. Alright, I'm gonna get up and let Bob in, because he is, complaining that he is not in the room. And then, let's see. We got a couple folks who jumped in. Hello, Akatsuki. This is, my beautiful new Halloween filter. Hello, Nell and Mr. Gerardify. Hey, Jessica. Sorry if I missed ya. When are we gonna watch a horror film? That's gonna be, every night at 6. I won't be vocal, because if I stream and I'm on voice chat 3 times a day, it'll kill my voice. But, it'll just be movies on Twitch. I'm gonna go get the cat. Come here, cat! Hi! A spooky cat! A spooky kitty! Come here. Come on. Come here, be spooky. He doesn't want to. We always joke that Bob is a Halloween cat because he's really long and thin and dark furred, and when he arches his back, he looks like one of those Halloween cats. Hey, Xavier, welcome. Shen Qingchu released a breath of relief. His original estimate was a deduction of around 50, or perhaps to be simply deducted everything. A deduction of 10 was much better than he thought. He'd been deducted now, but there were chances in the future to earn them back. But shortly after he let out that breath, Mingfan pointed to Luo Binghe and yelled, "Hit him!" Shen Qingchu almost vomited a mouthful of blood straight from his chest. Numerous disciples heard the order and tackled him. Shen Qingchu involuntarily tore off a handful of leaves and sent them all singing through the air. He regretted it as soon as they left his hand. Oh, the fuck am I doing? No matter what, Luo Binghe was the magnificent male lead. It wasn't as if he'd never been gang beaten before, like they could beat him to death. Like shit you need to worry. He could have still gotten away with the previous instance, but now, fantastic, anyone would notice something was off. Aw, thank you, Daniel. Well. Okay. That's an error. I tried to set up a new, let's see, did it come through on? Yeah, that's where it came through on. I'm gonna have to fix that. I tried to set up a new chat box because we've had, or not chat box, alert box, because we've had problems with it in the past. It doesn't seem to be working, except it did play sounds. It did do that. I also wonder why I need to mess with the chat box settings too, because it doesn't seem to stay. It seems to go away after a little while. I'll have to look at that after the stream. Okay. Let's see. Numerous disciples were splattered with blood and no longer dared gang up on Luo Binghe, anxiously gathering around Mingfan. Shishong, what's going on? Shishong, I also seem to have been cut by a knife. Mingfan's face was green and white, and only after a long moment did he throw out a "Go!" and then leading a group of lackeys, covering their behinds and holding their arms, he vigorously withdrew. They truly came like the wind and left like the wind. Ning Ying Yang, who remained, stood there dumbly for a while, then shouted, "Ah, Luo, just now, were you the one who sent them running?" Luo Binghe shook his head, expression gloomy. He stood up, straightening with difficulty, but then bent down again with a tense look, searching the ground for something, turning over fallen leaves, dry twigs, and mud this way and that multiple times. Shen Qingchu knew what he was looking for. Naturally, it was that jade accessory lost in the confusion. He saw it clearly. Before fighting, Mingfan had swung out his arm, and with it the red string had snapped on a branch high above their heads, but he couldn't point out that now. Also, just now, after he'd sent the leaves flying, he'd heard that heart-shattering systems sound. Violation, OOC, B points, -10 times 6. Current B points, 30. He'd fallen below passing grade in an instant. So 1 leaf equals 10 points? Don't use such simple, crude arithmetic. Ning Ying Yang didn't dare speak. After all, she'd caused this entire affair. If not for her big mouth, Luo Binghe would never have suffered such a beating, on top of pointlessly losing his accessory. She immediately began to help Luo Binghe search. But they, of course, remained empty-handed, right until it became dark. Luo Binghe stood dumbly in place, staring at the mess of the ground. A large patch had been completely overturned by them, but they still couldn't find it. Seeing him so dazed and beside himself, Ning Ying Ying was a little frightened and grabbed his hand. Luo, if we can't find it, let's just let it be. I'm sorry, I'll buy you another one later, alright? Luo Binghe paid her no heed. He slowly withdrew his hand and walked towards the forest exterior, head lowered. Ning Ying Ying hurried to join him. Shen Qingchu was truly impressed with himself. These two children had searched an entire afternoon, and he'd actually gone and watched the entire afternoon. What explanation was there, other than him having too much fucking time on his hands? He waited until they'd walked far, then finally emerged from his hiding place. He raised his head and looked, then tapped his foot on the ground, experiencing what it meant to have a body as light as a swallow, and with a great ease plucked the jade accessory from where it was caught on a branch. Shen Qingchu actually wanted to secretly return it to Luo Binghe, but he was familiar with the system's nature. This would definitely count as a violation. He didn't have extra points to squander. After thinking, Shen Qingchu decided he'd keep it for now. Maybe afterwards this jade accessory would be of great use. For example, perhaps during a critical moment he could bargain it in exchange for his life. At this time, a line of green text with a strong 3D effect jumped into view. Congratulations! Obtained key prop, fake jade guanin ×1. For changing the storyline, Shen Qingchu IQ plus 100. Current B points, 130. Please keep working hard! The points that had just been deducted were not only restored, they even increased. On top of that, this jade guanyin, judging from its influence on Luo Binghe, was definitely a high-level prop and could be used to preserve his life. What a happy surprise. A burst of satisfaction rushed through Shen Qingchu, clearing away even the gloom he'd gotten from crouching in the dark for a whole afternoon. To the point that even the system's punchable Google Translate-like voice became melodious beyond compare. And outside the forest, Luo Binghe, who'd already left the back mountain area, slowly unclenched his fist. Lying in his palm was a whole green leaf. Its edges were sharp and stained with blood. Our boy's starting to figure out. Someone helped me. I wonder who it is. Alright, Chapter 5, Beginner Level Quest. Ever since Shen Qingchu awakened from the inexplicable fever, during the days he was recuperating, Yu Qingyuan came to visit him many times. As the world's #1 major cultivation sect leader, or it could be said, the principal of a comprehensive cultivation university, his workload must have been heavy, yet he could still be so considerate to his Shidi. As a stranger in a strange place, Shen Qingchu practically wanted to shed tears of gratitude. So just to keep reminding folks in case people pop in and don't know, Shishong, Shime, Shidi, those are like terms of endearment based on your position in the group. Shidi is little brother, so Yu Qingyuan is big boss guy in charge of everything. Shen Qingchu would be his little brother, his Shidi. That the original goods could actually turn on such a superior and fellow disciple, breach their brotherly covenant just like that, it's clear how much of a scum he was. Yu Qingyuan was carrying the bamboo house's porcelain tea bowl, eyes full of earnest concern. Now that Shidi's rested for several days, has your health improved? Lightly waving his folding fan, Shen Qingchu was immersed in the atmosphere of brotherly love. Qingchu has long recovered. I've caused Shishong trouble, making you worry. Yu Qingyuan said, Then I suppose it's about time for Shidi to leave the mountains. Is there anything you need? The hand Shen Qingchu was using to fan himself froze. Leave the mountains? Yu Qingyuan said, surprised. Have you forgotten because of the illness? Didn't you tell me before to leave the matter of Shuanghu City to you as a training opportunity for your disciples? So it was something troublesome undertaken by the original goods. But while he'd been familiarizing himself with this body's spiritual power and techniques, currently they still weren't second nature. How could he take disciples down the mountains for training? Just as he was about to thicken his face and embarrass himself, to renege and say his body wasn't well after all, the system's unfeeling voice reverberated. Beginner level quest issued. Location, Shuanghu City. Quest, complete training. Please click to accept. At the same time, the quest synopsis popped up before him with two options on the bottom. The left, accept. The right, reject. So this was a beginner level quest. Shen Qingchu's gaze lingered on accept for a while. The option became green, a ding sounded, and the system notified, "Quest successfully accepted. Please read the files thoroughly and make your preparations. We wish you a swift success." Shen Qingchu came back to himself and said to Yu Qing... Oh, they spelled the name wrong. Yu Qingyuan while smiling. "I naturally remember. It's just these days I've rested too much and become lazy. I almost forgot about this matter. I'll head out in a few days." Yu Qingyuan nodded and said, "If you're not completely well, no need to force yourself. There's no rush to train your disciples. You also don't need to personally take care of the elimination." Shen Qingchu agreed while smiling, but he could not help giving Yu Qingyuan 2 extra glances. "Xiangmen Shishang, your current role is too much like a quest-giving NPC." All affairs at Qingjing Peak, whether large or small, were handed to and looked after by the trusted subordinate Ming Fan. Shen Qingchu discovered that as long as the male lead wasn't involved, this child was surprisingly efficient and intelligent. They were able to set out on the second day. Before leaving Qingjing Peak, Shen Qingchu briefly inspected his appearance. Teal robes, loose sash, sword at left hip, fan in right hand. Elegant, cultured, reliable, graceful. A proper, otherworldly existence. In short, absolutely not OOC. Perfect. At the bottom of the long 100-step stone stairway by the mountain gates was the carriage prepared for Shen Qingchu, as well as numerous horses for the accompanying disciples. Shen Qingchu, "Are you making fun of me? No matter what, this is still a cultivation setting. Why aren't we flying on swords?" The system coolly replied, "Even if it's a magical setting like Harry Potter, not every wizard goes out riding brooms. It's too conspicuous." Shen Qingchu muttered, "You're sure knowledgeable. Did you do business over at Harry Potter's before?" The system typed out a giant line of hovering symbols. ... In all these years of operation, Shen Qingchu might have been the first person bored enough to act so familiarly with the system and fuck around with it. However, thinking about it more, it's true. This trip down the mountains was for the sake of training. The majority of these disciples were young and lacked experience and hadn't found their personal swords yet. According to Kangchong Mountain Sect's conventions, only once a disciple's cultivation reaches a certain stage can they go to the 12 Peaks Wanjian Peak to pick out a suitable sword. Though it's said the person picks the sword, in truth the sword also picks the person. If a person without any decent talent insists on taking a top-class sword capable of condensing collected spiritual energy from the heavens and earth, it would be tantamount to a beautiful woman marrying an ugly man, or arranging fresh flowers in cow dung. You can imagine the sword wouldn't be willing. Oh man, some of the dialogue and stuff in this game is so fun. Okay. Luo Binghei's golden finger only activated when he found his own personal sword, the mystical Zin Mo. Golden figure is like a plot trope for unbeatable weapon. Shen Qingchu entered the carriage. The carriage's appearance was very ornate, yet the interior was spacious and comfortable. A small incense burner faintly smoldered. Let me hit something real quick. I want to make sure something's working. Oh my god. What the heck? Can y'all see me? YouTube says I am not here. What the heck? YouTube, don't do this. Alright, I'm gonna check Discord and see if anybody can see me. I hope I haven't been talking to myself. Okay, it just popped up. Why were you gone, YouTube? That's scary. That's a real Halloween spook. Oh no. Maybe YouTube just got confused for a minute and didn't think I was doing anything? I don't know. That's weird. Okay, the chat was not appearing. Weird, YouTube. I don't know what is up with you, but okay. Let's continue. Now that I'm sure YouTube's not being broke. I think it has been having problems lately. Oh well. The carriage's appearance was ornate, blah blah blah. A small incense burner faintly smoldered. After sitting, Shen Qingchu felt that just now something didn't seem quite right and suddenly poked his fan out and raised it, lifting the curtains. He looked outside and immediately felt like he'd been shocked blind at the sight. No wonder he thought the silhouette hurrying back and forth around the carriage seemed familiar. Turned out the person being ordered to do miscellaneous tasks by everyone was none other than the great male lead Luo Binghe. Just then, Luo Binghe also hauled the last item onto the carriage, a white jade chessboard that was mandatory on all of Shen Qingchu's trips, though usually not used. He raised his head to see Shen Qingchu observing him with a complicated expression and slightly jolted, then respectfully called out, "Shizun." The injuries he'd received from Shen Qingchu's discipline were about healed, the bruises on his face had vanished, and one could finally see what he looked like. Even though he was young, his features were still soft and immature. It could not conceal the delicate handsomeness within them. On top of that, there was a shining air around the way he walked and moved. Who would be able to guess that this was Qing Jing's Peak's miserable flower bud that had been ravaged by winds and rains for many years? My poor boy. Although he was doing the rough work of moving miscellaneous items, his attitude was meticulous. It was hard to not be moved by that focused and earnest appearance of his, especially Shen Qingchu, who already had some fondness towards the male lead. He was very fond of how the male lead killed decisively, of how black and white and clear-cut he was with his kindness and hatred. After looking fixedly for a while, Shen Qingchu made an O sound, then pulled back his fan, dropping the curtains. It had to be said, the male lead was simply the male lead. Even though this kid was downtrodden, without background, prospects, or parents to love him, there were still so many women, 1, 2, 3, and 4, hanging off behind, embracing and throwing themselves at him. Good looks really were the way of the world. Of course, this explained why there were always cannon fodder characters who found him an eyesore and wanted to vent by beating him until he looked like a pig's head. Thinking again, he thought of something else. That's not right. If the number of traveling disciples, including Luo Binghe, was 10, but there were only 9 horses, then they were missing one. Alright, even if he thought with his toes, he'd know who the troublemaker was. As expected, amidst snickering, Mingfan's gleeful voice came from outside the carriage. Actually, we're short on horses, so we have no choice but to inconvenience Shidi at this time. Although since Shidi's foundation is poor, it's perfect. You can take this chance to train. Short on horses, my ass. In recent years, all the major sects, Kangchong Mountain Sect was #1 when it came to cultivation and competing for business. It was overflowing with wealth. Like they'd be short on even a single horse. Mingfan was truly well versed in digging his own grave as cannon fodder. He paused and added, "What? What sort of expression is that? You dissatisfied?" Neither haughty nor humble, Luo Binghe evenly said, "I wouldn't dare." At this point, a young girl's bell-like laugh sounded. Ning Ying Ying had arrived. "Shishong, what are you two talking about?" Shen Qingchu. Ugh. Really, voice, I must be out of practice reading. Shen Qingchu held his forehead. "Really, young lady, your timing." Ning Ying Ying was a strong catalyst for Mingfan and Luo Binghe's ever-worsening relationship. Whenever she appeared, Luo Binghe would always experience no shortage of suffering, and Mingfan no shortage of personal grave digging. Once again, Shen Qingchu reservedly lifted the carriage curtains a little, lost on whether he should speak. As expected, he saw Ning Ying Ying excitedly waving her hand. "Ah, Luo, not enough horses? Come ride with me." She really does bring a lot of hatred down on Luo Binghe. It must be known that this type of plot, where the downtrodden protagonist received special attention from a beauty, although it was a gratifying trope often seen on Zongdian literature, was also the likeliest to incite others' envy and persecution. At this time, if Luo Binghe accepted Ning Ying Ying's suggestion, he could forget about any peace this trip. Shen Qingchu could no longer bear to look. "Ying Ying, don't make a fuss. Men and women shouldn't be too intimate. No matter how close you are with your Shidi, there should be limits. Mingfan, why have we tarried so long and not set out yet?" Mingfan was overjoyed, thinking, as expected, Shizun and I are on the same page. He hastily urged the group to depart. Ning Ying Ying pouted but said nothing. The little skit over for now, Shen Qingchu detached his thoughts and continued silently reading the files spread out on his desk. This trip was not only to commemorate the first plot line that took him off the mountain, but more importantly concerned a beginner-level quest that would determine whether or not he could unfreeze the OOC function. He couldn't afford to not treat it seriously. From the file contents, the location was a small city several tens of kilometers away from Kangchong Mountain Sect. Recently within the city, a number of murders had occurred. Already 9 people had been successively killed. Every victim shared a commonality. The skin on their body had been meticulously and completely peeled off. See, we got some Halloween in here. From head to toe, the technique precise, as if the skin had never been attached to the deceased body at all, enough to raise one's hackles. Therefore, the murderer became known as the Skinner Demon. The Skinner Demon's chosen victims were all young, beautiful women. Therefore, in Shuanghu City, every family with daughters, wives, and concubines, as soon as night came, would shut and lock their doors. Despite this, they could not stop the Skinner Demon from freely coming and going. 9 horrible deaths in succession, yet the officials were at complete loss for what to do. The city's people were in a state of panic. There were even rumors that it was the work of a ghost. Otherwise, how could it disappear without a trace? Several influential families met together. At last they decided to ask someone to visit Kangchong Mountain Sect and plead the immortal cultivators for assistance. He'd already read the information many times, but no matter how many times he read, it wasn't the least bit helpful. The hell is a Skinner Demon? Never heard of it. Was this plot added or hidden? Is it dangerous? Is it strong? Am I able to deal with it even? This isn't what we agreed on. When he asked these questions, the system said, "What isn't? Previously, you were a reader of novels. Novels are a type of artistic creation. With artistic creations, there are always decisions that have to be made, things that have to be left out. And now you have become part of this world. Naturally, you have to personally experience everything, regardless of importance. You must follow even the plot lines omitted in the original work to the very end." Shen Qingchu had no say in anything. That's why he diligently trained for numerous days, only seeking to make things second nature, lest instead of dying beneath the male lead's feet, he croaked at the hands of some no-name monster, like a general passing away before his first victory. Luo Benghe was still outside, so the whole time he didn't dare relax his vigil, keeping an eye out for activity. At the same time, he rummaged through the carriage interior. Everything one could think of was here. Shen Qingchu had managed to rummage out 5 or 6 different tea sets, and was speechless for a while. No matter what, in his past life, he could still have counted as a wealthy second gen, and he still hadn't been this pointlessly indulgent in pursuit of first-world diseases, okay? At this time, from outside the carriage came a wave of guffaws. He swept a glance outside. Alone, Luo Benghe walked at the back of the group, at times walking, at times running. From time to time, horses would circle him and purposely kick up clouds of dust until he was filthy and caked with it. Shen Qingchu couldn't help clutching the handle of his fan, knuckles itching faintly. This was only a book. All the people were constructs, imaginary characters. Logically, Shen Qingchu was very clear about this fact. But when a character was actually being taunted and bullied before him like this, asking him to be completely unmoved was too unrealistic. Having dissuaded them several times to no avail, Ning Yingying finally realized her interference only made things worse, and anxiously urged her horse near the carriage, calling into the interior, "Shizun, the Shishongs, look at them!" Shen Qingchu's heart was a little moved, yet he didn't show it, and placidly said, "What about them?" Her voice carried a strong tone of indignation, and she defiantly said, "They're bullying someone like this, yet you're not telling them off. If you keep on like this, Shizun, what are you teaching your disciples to become?" This was a direct tattling, but Mingfan and the others felt no pressure at all, because they were all used to Shen Qingchu in the past silently permitting these actions. The harsher their bullying of Luo Benghe was, the happier Shizun was. Why should they exercise restraint? Mingfan was the happiest. As expected that day in the back mountain area, Luo Benghe must have used some sorcery he learned from gods knows where. Today, Shizun was here, so he'd be crushed. Shen Qingchu made an "oh" sound, then spoke one line. "Luo Benghe, you come here." Luo Benghe's expression was dull. Accustomed to this, he gave a yes and walked over. At first, everyone was still filled with schadenfreude, thinking he was going to seize Luo Benghe for physical discipline. However, what happened next shattered all their worldviews. Shen Qingchu used his fan to lift the curtains, then jerked his chin at Luo Benghe before shooting a glance at the carriage interior. Even though he didn't speak, the meaning couldn't be clearer. Ning Yingying happily said, "Luo, hurry and get on. Shizun is letting you ride with him." Like thunder on a clear day. If they hadn't known so well Shizun for so many years, Mingfan and the others would all suspect Shen Qingchu was possessed by a demon. Luo Binghe also froze in astonishment, but he reacted extremely quickly after hesitating for a short while, and he answered, "Many thanks to Shizun." He stepped into the carriage, conscientious, and sat straight-backed in a corner. After sitting down, his hands and feet remained tucked in, like he was afraid that his patched-up clothes, which he'd patched himself, would dirty the interior. The system. Warning! Shen Qingchu. Warning rejected. I wasn't OOC. The system. Shen Qingchu would never do anything to alleviate Luo Binghe's troubles. Verdict, OOC level 100%. Shen Qingchu said, "Have you carefully examined this character's complicated state of mind? Of course he would never do it if it was purely to alleviate Luo Binghe's troubles. But right now my goal is to not disappoint Ning Yingying as her Shizun. Ning Yingying is my dearest little disciple, and she pleaded with me. How can I let her plea be for nothing? So my actions are completely in line with Shen Qingchu's character logic. Your warning is invalid." Hello, Anna. Thanks for joining us. With the exchanges from the last couple days, he'd gradually figured out several working methods. The system had rules, but the rules weren't rigid. Since that was the case, there was leeway for bargaining. As expected, for the time being, the system couldn't think of an argument for deduction. Soaring with gratification, Shen Qingchu couldn't help a laugh. Originally, he'd been quietly sitting in the carriage, meditating with his eyes closed, seemingly already in a trance. At this moment, Luo Binghe suddenly heard him laugh and couldn't help but secretly glance at him. To tell the truth, to say that Luo Binghe wasn't surprised would be a lie. Even though he'd always revered Shen Qingchu, he'd long understood well how Shizun treated and looked at him. Previously, he'd thought that if Shen Qingchu asked him to get in, there must be something even more terrible waiting, and had mentally prepared himself. He didn't expect for Shen Qingchu to not bother with him at all, focusing on himself as he began to meditate. Luo Binghe thought for a moment. It seemed he'd never been this close, had never carefully examined Shen Qingchu like this before. Appearance-wise, you couldn't complain about Shen Qingchu. Perhaps he couldn't qualify as supremely beautiful, but he was certainly good-looking, and one you wouldn't tire of looking at. The profile of his face in three-quarter view seemed to have been carved by creeks and mountain springs, and when not in a cold scowl, became gentle and bright. As soon as Shen Qingchu opened his eyes, he saw Luo Binghe staring at him. He could see a glimpse of the future Luo Binghe's unique grace, that of eyes like cold stars, a soft and radiant smile with muted words and quiet laughter. Luo Binghe had been caught red-handed, and right as he was lost about what to do, Shen Qingchu had already smiled at him. The smile was purely unconscious, but Luo Binghe felt like he'd been pricked by a small, fine thorn, and quickly averted his gaze, becoming increasingly awkward, unsure what he was feeling. I think we all know what he's feeling. Yeah, we all know what that was the moment the bud has sprouted in Luo Binghe's heart. Because his teacher smiled at him. Very soon, Shen Qingchu couldn't bring himself to smile anymore. The system notified, "Violation, OOC, B points -5, current B points 165. Shen Qingchu, even smiling briefly gets a deduction?" The system righteously said, "OOC is OOC." Oh, I love that part. It's so cute, the way that they gently show how the characters' opinions of each other change. Like, obviously, Shen Qingchu is not entirely seeing Luo Binghe as who he is. He's seeing him as who he will be, who he was in the story. There's so many layers to how he sees the character that inform how he treats the kid. But the kid doesn't know any of that. The kid's just like, this is my teacher, and he was nice to me for one time, because no one's ever nice to me. Yay! And he just falls in love because someone was nice to him. And of course, Shen Qingchu's not going to recognize it for years because he sees Binghe through the view of the book. It's always kind of informed by who he thinks that the character should be, not who he is. And it's going to take him a long time to figure out, oh, I've made a mistake, you know? What a lovely little story. I really enjoy it. I think that's where we'll stop because my voice is a little weak. I gotta build up my, my stamina again. I'm gonna pop a throat lozenge and what have you. But we're gonna jump over into the Discord and watch 2 episodes of this show if y'all want to join me, and then later we'll play some Fatal Frame. Thanks for watching. Welcome to the Halloween extravaganza. Everything that we do is going to be voted on by members. I'll post the links probably in the evenings, I think. The link for the movie we're going to watch is live. It looks like Silent Hill is winning last time I checked. If you want to participate and get access to bonus content and lots of cool stuff, you can become a member through Patreon or YouTube. Links are in the description. Silent Hill Book 3 is open for pre-order. I'm thinking I'm going to be able to send in the final product around the 15th. I'm waiting on the cover and a couple other things, and then I hope, my goal is to get it to people in the US by Halloween. We'll see what happens. But that's everything, I think. Thanks again to all of our members, Phil and Daniel, and Jeff, and everybody that joined us. Thanks so much, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.